Protests across China. Not just protests against a little thing here or there, but protests against the central government, against the leadership, against Xi Jinping, against the CCP. All of these things are spreading like wildfire. These events are not isolated. No, these are full-blown protests taking over the country. This is something I never expected to see in my lifetime. This is unprecedented. Covering the stuff that I've been covering has been very hard to get monetization from YouTube, so I'm very proud and super happy to say that this video is brought to you by NordVPN. NordVPN is the VPN that I choose when I need to keep my online privacy and anonymity safe, and I think you guys should too. Because what it does is it encrypts, hides, and makes everything anonymous that you're doing online. That's really important, especially around the holiday season where you're using your credit card and all of your information's out there trying to buy stuff. That's when cyber criminals are out trying to get your information too. The VPN that I love to use is NordVPN. NordVPN is super easy to use. You can hop around to different servers around the world depending on your speed or location, and it keeps everything you're doing anonymous and safe. If you go to nordvpn.com/Laowai, not only are you going to get an absolutely massive discount off of a 2-year plan, but you're also going to get 3 free additional months. So it's a great time to get it. nordvpn.com/Laowai, and you're helping to support the channel. Many are calling this Tiananmen Square 2.0. And I'd have to agree, this is to that scale, if not bigger. It all started when I saw something happen in Henan. Foxconn workers taking to the streets, disrupting the great harmony of China, and then it carrying over to Shanghai. Shanghai people rising up saying, stop the COVID lockdowns, but then that protest turning into stop the CCP, step down CCP, step down Xi Jinping. And that protest went into Beijing, and it went into Guangzhou, and it spread like wildfire. Ironically, to quote Chairman Mao, we can say, a single spark can set off a prairie fire. This is probably not the prairie fire he would want to be happening. Why is this so crazy? Well, first off, in a country that has 1 surveillance camera for every 7 citizens, for a country that's basically North Korea with a little bit more money, for a country that has an internal security apparatus made directly to stop anything like this from happening, for a country that puts so much of its money and effort into stopping and controlling its citizens and to tracking every single movement they make, for a country that makes every person on the internet tie their personal identification number with every forum post, with every sign up, with every single motion they make online. You can see how crazy this is. For word of mouth to be able to spread these protests across the country, something crazy must have happened. Well, it turns out that when you institute a zero COVID policy, and then the whole rest of the world is looking around saying, what is China doing? We already finished that COVID stuff. When they watched the Chinese government weld people into their homes, people screaming from their buildings, people starving, tension tends to build up. I'm now watching people joining protests in China that were in full support of the government up until now. It's switching like this. People that were proud to live under Xi Jinping's China are changing. Old and young, nationalist or international, these people are changing their opinions. I watched a country that was supposed to be nationalist and pro-authoritarianism cover itself in graffiti, expressing desire for freedom, expressing desire for liberty, expressing desire to be part of the international dialogue, expressing their desire to live like you and me. It's awesome. It's amazing. And it won't be met with peace. What's going to happen in China is going to be very bad, yes. First, you're going to see lots of disinformation campaigns. There are people in all countries being paid by the Chinese government to tell you that this is much smaller than it is. This is not small. Some of these disinformation agents are being paid by the Chinese government to tell you that this is a foreign influence campaign. These are people from different countries like the US sent to China to disrupt social harmony. No. This is Chinese people standing up for their rights, standing up for what they deserve: humanity. They deserve to be human like every other person in the entire world, but their government treats them like trash. Their government treats them like slaves. It says in the Chinese national anthem, 起来，不愿做奴隶的人们, which means arise, all those who refuse to be slaves. The irony is that the people are rising up, and they are refusing to be slaves. No, this isn't a foreign influence campaign. I didn't start these protests. I have nothing to do with this. All I can say is I'm very proud of the Chinese people that stood up and decided that that day was the day that they were going to do this. You have full international support.
Protesters hold up A4 size sheets of paper, because what better way to protest than not say anything at all? If the authorities are going to ban you from saying anything negative about Xi Jinping's anti-COVID policies or against the government, then why not just hold up a blank piece of paper? Because guess what? Everyone that sees that paper will know what you mean. People around the world are having their A4 protests in solidarity, even in Hong Kong.
But like I said, this is going to get ugly. There is no way the Chinese government's going to take this lying down. There are agents throughout the entire country tasked with finding anyone that is organizing these uprisings, kidnapping them from the protests, and disappearing people overnight. Black-bagged and gone. This will scare people. There are tanks rolling into cities. There is police and military presence everywhere in China right now. It is intimidating. The state will ultimately win. The Chinese government is not going to allow these protests to overthrow the government. But what will happen? Here's my predictions. You're going to see celebrities be forced by the government to go out there and make statements about how to report individuals for starting protests, how to be good patriotic citizens, and to fully adhere to the zero COVID policies and to follow Xi Jinping. How to be a good patriot and to realize that all of these crazy, silly people that are out protesting do not align with your values as a good Chinese citizen. You'll see that for sure. You'll then start seeing reward campaigns for people ratting out their neighbors. The Chinese government absolutely will start paying people and rewarding people or getting information that leads to the shutdown of these protests. Foreign influence absolutely will be blamed. They've already started blaming people like myself and my friend Serpent Zede for going out there and starting protests in China, secretly sneaking over there and going to start these protests. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, but yet they are sending out documents and putting things out there all over the Chinese internet that are circling foreigners, circling people from different countries in these crowds in Shanghai, saying that they are the ones that started all of this. You're also going to see documents all over the place saying that this is a CIA color revolution, because Chinese people would never try to overthrow their government or ever, I don't even have to go that far, they would never try to express any discontent with their government. Chinese people are loyal, nationalist, and patriotic. You'll see people cower. You'll see people believe the propaganda. You'll see people get scared off. You'll see the dwindling of protests. You'll see death. You will see bloodshed. You might even see little mini Tiananmen Square massacres all across the country to stop this.
Now, a bloody end to the protests is the worst case scenario, of course. What's more likely to happen is that China will use its absolutely insane amount of internal security, surveillance, and tracking techniques to hunt down every single last person after these protests fizzle out and make sure that they suffer. Make sure that they do not progress through life. Make sure that they have been removed from society, and to make sure that any and all dissent in the future will be crushed. That's the most likely scenario. It will be a silent crushing of the freedom that the people tried to achieve.
You will see increased police presence from now until who knows when. SWAT, police vans, increased surveillance, all of this stuff will be a feature of daily Chinese life more than it ever has been in the history of mankind. The army will probably end up being sent in a lot of places, and ultimately, we will see these protests fizzle. The government may end up abandoning the zero COVID policy because they'll use an excuse like, oh, we've now found a vaccine that works for our Chinese people. Remember, the Chinese government refused to use foreign vaccines, the ones that actually worked, on its own people, using excuses about how the Chinese vaccine is the only one for Chinese people, which has left the country wholly unprepared for COVID. Now that the latest variant of COVID is much less potent than the initial one, they might find an excuse much later on down the road. Now the variant is not very strong, so we waited it out. Finally, we did it. We claim victory over COVID because it's not that fatal anymore, and we can say that, see, unlike other countries that lost millions of people, we waited it out, and we are the victors over COVID. See, wasn't it good that we locked you down for 3 years? That's what's going to happen. But the most important thing that's going to come out of these protests is that the landscape of Chinese society will be changed forever. Why? Because this is the first taste that people have had to be so discontent and let so much discontent boil up in their hearts that they finally went out and put their lives on the line to express discontent. This is the first time this has ever happened. This is the first time that the bullshit Chinese propaganda that says that the Chinese government represents the Chinese people has been proven wrong, and the whole world has seen it. I've said it for years. I love China, and for so many years now, the Chinese government has used this absolutely ridiculous and dehumanizing narrative that the Chinese government represents the people of China, when in fact that is not the truth. They can't represent themselves because they don't have the ability to. And for the first time, I have seen them stand up and do their duty as human beings to express discontent against that government. So bullshit to your narrative that the Chinese government represents the people. It doesn't. The people have spoken, and they will continue speaking from now on. Whether or not these protests continue now, they absolutely will continue in the future. This is the new China. If you guys want to see proper coverage of what's happening, you got to go to my live channel, The China Show. It's a weekly show every single Friday where we cover all of the current events, everything that's unfolding from people on the ground in China. So definitely go check that out. Make sure you're subscribed and you'll be at the right place for all your China news. Thanks.